When you intake caffeine, within just 10 minutes, your body starts to wake up and feel a boost of energy. After 20 minutes, your brain works sharper, you react faster, and you feel more focused. At around 45 minutes, caffeine hits its peak level in your blood and you feel most energized, highly focused, and sometimes even a bit jittery. Caffeine is absorbed from the stomach and intestines easily and almost completely. Caffeine moves quickly into the bloodstream and crosses the blood-brain barrier within 15 minutes and rapidly reacting the brain. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors. Adenosine is a neurotransmitter in our brain. It builds up in your brain during the day and you may feel tired and sleepy and relaxed. And when you block adenosine, you feel less sleepy, you feel more awake, alerted, and energized. When adenosine is blocked, dopamine and norepinephrine level increase, which leads to improved mood, focus, and alertness. Nerve cell activity increases throughout the brain. Caffeine also causes blood vessels to constrict, which is why caffeine can relieve headache in some people. Caffeine stimulates the adrenal gland to produce more norepinephrine. It also promotes lipolysis, which means releasing fatty acids from fat tissue, especially during exercise period. That's why caffeine helps for weight loss. I will tell you everything you need to know about caffeine, what dosage is safe, how it affects our body, top 6 most beneficial effects of caffeine, and top 3 negative impacts caffeine can have. The first benefit from caffeine is that it improves mental performance and alertness. This effect is seen in almost 90% of adults who consume caffeine. To achieve this effect, you typically use around 40 to 200 milligrams of caffeine per day. The second benefit is caffeine increases physical performance by about 10%. The main mechanism is that it raises adrenaline level, mobilizes fat stores, and spares muscle glycogen. This combination helps improve overall physical performance. The third benefit is regular intake of caffeine decreases the risk of neurodegenerative disease like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. Taking about 200 to 400 milligrams per day over the long term can reduce Parkinson's risk around 30% and Alzheimer's risk around 15%. This effect happens because the caffeine's antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, which also protect dopamine producing neurons. The fourth most important benefit is that regular caffeine intake, about 300 to 400 milligrams per day, decreases the risk of type 2 diabetes. This risk reduction is around 25% based on meta-analysis over 1 million participants. Caffeine works by improving insulin sensitivity, increasing energy expenditure, and reducing inflammation. The fifth benefit is that caffeine relieves headaches and migraines when combined with painkillers. A dose of 100 to 200 milligrams of caffeine shows about 70% of effectiveness in people who have regular headaches or migraines. It happens because caffeine causes constriction of blood vessels, boosts absorption of painkillers, and blocks adenosine. And sixth, caffeine also has weight loss effect. It increases thermogenesis and fat breakdown called lipolysis, which means that consuming caffeine boosts fat burning. Meta-analysis shows that daily caffeine intake increases energy expenditure about 10% for several hours after intake, even when a person is at rest. In practice, this usually equals around 100 extra calories burned per day. However, the weight loss effect of caffeine decreases over time because the body builds tolerance. After about 4 weeks, this tolerance becomes significant, so caffeine alone is not effective for long-term weight loss. Caffeine also decreases appetite in about 50% of the population. This happens because caffeine blocks adenosine receptors in the brain, which increases dopamine and norepinephrine activity, reducing hunger. Appetite suppression usually begins about 30 to 60 minutes after caffeine intake, when blood caffeine level peak and central nervous system stimulation is strongest. The appetite suppressing effect typically lasts around 3 hours, depending on the dosage and the person's individual sensitivity. For noticing appetite suppression, a dose should be about 100 to 300 milligrams of caffeine. Now let's talk about caffeine's negative effects. About 20 to 25% of people experiencing anxiety, jitters, and nervousness, especially with doses of 200 to 400 milligrams. So people who are prone to anxiety or have high stress should avoid high caffeine intake. Caffeine can also cause sleep problems in about 40% of people if it consumed within 6 hours of bedtime. This effect is seen with 100 to 200 milligrams, especially in sensitive individuals. The third issue is heart palpitations. Around 10 to 20% of people report palpitations after taking 200 to 400 milligrams of caffeine. High doses make this more likely, while low doses rarely cause it. This effect mostly affects people with arrhythmias or existing heart disease due to stimulation of beta-adrenergic receptors and increased adrenaline. In low doses, anxiety and heart palpitations are possible but very rare. Less than 10% of people experience this side effect when consuming under 100 milligrams or less of caffeine. When caffeine is used regularly, especially at high doses, tolerance develops over time. This means caffeine loses its effectiveness and mild dependence can also develop. The most common source of caffeine is coffee. 1 cup of brewed coffee contains around 100 milligrams of caffeine. Espresso and instant coffees usually have less potent. They typically contain around 70 to 80 milligrams per serving. Black tea contains around 60 milligrams per cup, while green tea contains around 30 milligrams. Energy drinks contains higher doses like 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams. It depends. It's possible higher even. And standard can of cola, around 330 milligrams, contain around 40 milligrams of caffeine. Dark chocolate contains around 25 milligrams per 30 gram, and milk chocolate contains around 5 to 7 milligrams per 30 gram. Many supplements contain between 100 to 300 milligrams of caffeine per serving. The worst consumption of caffeine is when you exceed 400 milligrams per day. At this level, it can cause anxiety, nervousness, rapid heartbeat, stomach upset, insomnia, and sometimes heart palpitations. Serious side effects are rare, but the risk significantly increases if you intake above 1000 milligrams. Side effects are rare, but the risk increases significantly above 1000 milligrams. Caffeine toxicity is very rare, but if a person takes 1500 or 2000 milligrams or more, it can be life-threatening and dangerous. It can cause arrhythmias, seizure, or sometimes even death.